Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to another episode of the Redwater Podcast. As always, I'm Yasar,
And I'm Chemo.
and it's been another eventful race weekend. I think at this point, honestly, even before this point, it's been clear that this is for sure the best season of the, what you call it,
Ground effect era.
ground
Yeah.
effect era. Yeah, yeah,
hmm
yeah. And this has been another eventful race. I think it was kind of boring at times because maybe there was, okay, obviously there was like some crazy overtakes, which we're going to get into, and some crazy failed overtakes, but definitely just another eventful race, a lot to talk about, and we'll just get right into it. I think we'll go with chronological order through the race, starting off with qualifying. Kind of some big points from qualifying. You had Paris crashing out of Q1.
Yep.
Surprising, but also not really surprising. We'll get into the race. He did have a decent comeback, but just him kind of and him spinning out like where he did. Yes, you can maybe say it was wet conditions. It was a little rough, but I remember I think one of the commentators saying, or I think it was from one of the analysis videos I'd watched, where they mentioned you'd notice like some other drivers through that area also maybe like got a little unstable, but it's just you have to have the
Yeah.
skill to be able to save yourself and not go straight into the wall like Paris did. But Paris did Paris things once again.
Yeah, it was tricky conditions. And it's one of those things where, on one hand, yeah, I understand, like it's more understandable why he crashed in those tricky conditions and at a
Mm,
tricky track like that and that area that caught a lot of people out. The difference is that no one else crashed in that area in quali.
yeah,
So it doesn't really matter.
yeah,
To defend him,
mm,
right, is just kind of ignoring the fact that two of the people that could possibly take his seat, right, like didn't crash there. And we'll get one of them did crash, but in a different area.
yeah,
Speaking of,
mm,
yeah, in Q3, Sonoda crashed, had a really nasty crash, honestly. He got flown up,
mm,
threw up in the air. They fixed the track after, I think, too, to make sure that no one else would have
yeah. Oh
that.
yeah, it caused an instant
Yeah.
red flag.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I mean, for the race, they made sure that that curb wouldn't launch
Oh,
more
you mean
cars into the
afterwards?
air.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't be having that.
I thought it wasn't
Um,
specifically the curve, but I feel like he had said he had bottomed out in the corner, and then that pushed him onto the curb, and then I guess the curb then kind of launched him afterwards. But I get what you mean
yeah,
of just trying to resurface the curb so that if someone gets on it, that doesn't happen again.
right, right.
Mm,
Yeah, pretty scary crash. And other than that, I Q3 honestly went pretty standard. The Austin Martins actually had pretty good pace. I called them to
mm.
have a terrible weekend, and actually they ended up being okay.
Yeah. Same
At
with
least
the
in terms of
Ferraris. I
pace.
think both of us,
Yeah.
at least after Silverstone, there was some doubts about Ferrari, but I think
Mhm.
Ferrari this weekend were kind of where they should be. Obviously not where they want to be. They want to be, higher up, and especially they were higher up at the start of the season, but them being
Yes.
kind of in that top five mix, that's where they're supposed to be, and I was happy to see them there.
Yeah, I think everyone expects them to be fourth fastest right now.
Mm,
And that's I know that doesn't make them feel any better, but they were about as fast as we expected. They
mm,
you could say that they were just a little half step behind Mercedes in terms of outright pace.
mm.
And I think it was just the drivers that kind of made a little bit more of the difference. I'm sure that Ferrari is still a little tricky to drive, even if it has a similar pace to the Mercedes.
Mm.
I'm sure that it's the Merc is probably a little more comfortable to drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, kind of really what we expected. I know we talked last episode. We said, yeah, we think the McLarens are going to end up being strong this race, just it being a very high downforce track, and that's
hmm
exactly what they do. Their first front row lockout in since I don't want to say exact years, but obviously since like late
2011,
2010s or
2011
2011s.
Canada, I think, or something like that.
Oh,
They
was their
said,
actual last front row
yeah,
lockout? Yeah, there you go.
something like that.
Mm,
It was during like Lewis's years, and so it goes to show like it's taken such a long time for McLaren to reach this point, and I think
mm,
this has been a long time coming. With a as good of a qualifier as Norris is, and as good of a qualifier as Piastri is becoming,
mm.
this was bound to happen this season.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, we both expected them to be quick, but I didn't think that they'd be the outright fastest by a country mile.
Mm,
Um, in Hungary. Hungary is not a track that you would expect the McLaren to be strong. And McLaren seems to be strong in tracks that you require you to be aero efficient,
mm,
meaning like, we both know this, but the least amount of drag for the most amount of downforce. If you can
mm,
have that balance, that your car is really, really efficient. And I think the
mm,
McLaren is probably the most efficient right now.
mm.
The Red Bull is definitely a close second, but clearly Max was having trouble getting that car into a setup window that he liked while keeping the pace to be somewhere close. And even though
They,
he had one
yeah.
more good hot lap than
Mm.
Lando, he still was behind Lando and Piastri,
Mm.
right?
Oh yeah, that was a big thing that Lando was only able to set like one like actual fast
Quality
lap
lap,
on
yeah.
fresh tires in Q3, partially because of the red flag, and then he didn't have
Hmm.
another fresh set of soft tires. That red flag I know also hindered like a couple drivers. I think it was either Magnussen or Hulkenberg that they kind of messed
Yeah.
him up, and then I think Alonso also was like pissed off because of how they handled
Yes.
the red flag or whatever. But I was gonna say with Max, I don't remember if it was from an analysis video, but I think the some of the commentators mentioned it also that specifically for that track, the way that Red Bull wanted to set up the car just made it a bit more understeery than Max typically likes, and that's part of why
Hmm.
like he struggled a bit more and maybe the Red Bull didn't seem like it had more pace. But from I guess the garage side and from the factory side, that for them seemed like the most optimal way to do it. It's just a little unfortunate that that's not necessarily like what Max wanted. Oh, they did it also too because they don't want it to be too oversteery because they wanted to protect the wear of the rear tires. That's what it was.
Rear
That's why they
tires.
did that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. They knew that tire wear was going to be a massive issue at the track, and
Mm,
especially in quali, with the weather and the way it was, that actually would work against them, right?
mm,
Because if they're trying to protect those tires, but it doesn't give the outright pace, right? That's the sacrifice. Then quality is going to be an area they're not going to be good in. And no matter how
yeah,
good Max
exactly.
is, he couldn't make up that difference. I also probably think that they did that because they figured the McLaren to be faster in the low speed corners. So
Mm,
there was no point trying to compete with him there. Instead, they tried to go the other way and try to beat them in more the medium to and medium speed corners. There's like one high speed corner at Hungary,
mm,
and then like any straight or anything to try to make up the difference.
mm.
But yeah, clearly McLaren just had it nailed. And last year, getting the second place, I guess I should have figured that like they'd find a way to set that car up right.
Mm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
they were fantastic. Lando had put in a great lap,
Yeah,
and probably one of his
the
best
fact
qualifying
that yeah,
performances.
everyone was setting their last laps, the track definitely like got better, but no one was able to match the lap he did. Absolutely
Yeah,
incredible lap. And
yeah,
unfortunately for me, my delusions didn't come true. Hamilton didn't get pole.
for Lewis. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean he did decent qualifying even though it seemed like during practice and stuff, maybe he wasn't like perfectly happy with the setup of the car, but he did well enough. It was Russell who ended up just having an absolutely terrible qualifying session because he went out in Q1 also, didn't he? Or was it Q2?
He went out in Q1.
He went out in
I
Q1,
believe
yeah.
he won in Q1, just like
Mm.
Perez, but not because he crashed. Russell just
Yeah,
didn't
he
have a good
just
lap, and then his
mhm.
team just didn't set it up well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then he was going out for another lap, and then he did one, but it wasn't fast enough, and then he ran. They didn't put him enough fuel in the car for him to be able to set another one, so it was over for
Right.
him. Yeah, but he wasn't even frustrated with the team necessarily about that. He was kind of frustrated himself because he said he took it way too easy on the first lap that he did. Like he probably could have pushed a bit harder because track evolution was just like nuts once the track started to get a bit better. But yeah, that's at least big things I can remember from qualifying. I think we can move on right into the race, starting outright with lap one. Lots of chaos. Lando Norris once again on pole, giving up giving up P1 right into the first corner. And so people are saying that it was a little controversial because obviously you had off the launch he kind of squeezed Piastri a little bit. It wasn't too bad. I think
He was
that
fair.
was
It was
perfectly
fair.
fair racing. Yeah, because he
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
gave him enough space. Then Piastri went technically he went deep into turn one, but not too deep. The way I look at it is if it was just between Piastri and Lando, then that's perfectly fair racing because Lando was definitely stalling the track. The issue was you had Max, who was trying to make it three wide into turn one, trying to go around Norris, and it just wasn't going to work. Norris ran out of space, so Max
Mhm.
ran out of space. He went off the track and then ended up in front of Lando. Obviously, Lando was going to complain, like, hey, he overtook me off track. I think they investigated it, but ultimately it didn't result into anything. And I wasn't necessarily upset about it anyway. I could see it maybe being you need to give the position back or 5 second penalty, but I'm perfectly okay with it just being a racing incident too. Like, it's lap one.
Yeah, I heard out the arguments saying that it was an illegal move or it was too much. And honestly, I think it was right on the edge. And I think the fact that Norris hasn't really brought it up or anything, even in the moment, he didn't even say a word,
Mm,
indicates that for him it was just yeah, it was a good move.
yeah.
Um, and I think Norris was a very generous teammate, giving him plenty of space. And Max also played it smart, not running into Norris, it's very possible that Max could have just been arrogant and turned in, and
Mm.
then we had another Hungary turn one incident.
Yeah.
But yeah, going off and then and everything. I understand from Max's perspective what that looked like. From Max's perspective, it didn't look good at all. But
Mm.
yeah, he tried to make it three wide. Guy in the inside, and then the guy on in the middle. They have the leeway on you. They're not.
Yeah.
It's not like they're beholden to you. So you risk it going around the outside. Sometimes that happens, dude. And
Mm.
he knows that. And I'm sure like he'll be over it now. But in the middle of the race, I completely understand why he was kind of upset.
Mm.
But that was kind of, we'll get into Max's radio messages later on, but that was kind of the first chip at like Max losing his sanity throughout this race. He did not
Yeah.
have a good race at all. It's probably his worst race of the
Mm.
season so far, honestly.
No, absolutely. Um, yeah, I think I don't remember any other big issues like lap one or
The
turn
first lap.
one. Yeah,
No,
that's
no.
the thing. I feel like from that point the race was fairly straightforward.
Mhm.
I know.
I'll
Well,
say
and
that
then Lando
Piastri
Lando
had
eventually
a
got past Max also, so it's like him getting in front like
yeah.
wasn't too big of an issue. What were you gonna say about Piastri?
Yeah, so Max let Lando by just to avoid the penalty and everything, I'm pretty
Mm.
sure. And I think if he hadn't done that, Lando definitely would have had a different race, but not like a different outcome. I think he would have ended up second or first, no
Mm.
matter what. I don't think Max had the overall pace and the tire
Mm.
wear,
Oh, did he actually let him
like
by though? I thought Lando just got past him like on track.
I thought he let him by. Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay,
thought
all
that the
right.
team basically told Max, you got to do this to play it safe, and then that's why
Mm.
they dropped the investigation.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I will say, yeah, so Piastri had a fantastic first stint. That was probably the first time I've seen all season that Piastri outperformed Norris in a tire stint, showing better overall average pace, right?
Mm.
While keeping those tires in a good window because there was no immediate drop off on that first stint.
Mm.
And I think it was definitely promising that like not only did he have the initiative to take the lead in the beginning, but then he was able to lead like that. That was showing that he is trying to, and getting closer to the level that Norris is at in terms of race management.
Mm.
Um, the problem is that Norris was not only trying to catch his teammate, but trying to hold off, two of perhaps the greatest drivers from
Yeah,
from the past 2 decades, right?
arguably of all time.
Yeah, well, one of
Yeah,
them arguably of all
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure McLaren, like they made honestly the smart decision to undercut or to try and
Mm.
cover them off, right? Because they figured using the data that they had got from that first stint that Piastri seemed like he had it in the bag,
Mm.
and that they figured, hey, we have another stop later. We can figure it out as we go.
Mm.
So in terms of that first stint, I think that was perfect McLaren. I think
Mm.
they were having a fantastic start. Lando obviously didn't have a good start, but if you're going to have it, lose the lead to anyone, if it's your
Mm.
teammate as a team, then that's not I don't think that's an L.
Yeah.
Um, Piastri's outperformed him in turn one. So then, yeah, after that first stint, McLaren looked great. And then we
Mm.
get to the second stint, and we start to get some drama. So yeah, the first
Yeah.
thing that happened, I believe, was Max got undercut by not only, I
By
guess
Hamilton
Lando
and
was
Leclerc. During
yeah
like
by
that
Hamilton
whole
and
race,
Leclerc.
Leclerc was basically just kind of following Hamilton the entire time. I think he pit pretty much the same lap or like the lap right after Hamilton would. He was just kind of
Mm.
following Hamilton. Hamilton, oh, my bad. Just got a phone call. Um, I was saying Leclerc was following Hamilton, and then obviously Hamilton's race was directly with Max. Even though Max at the time, obviously his goal was like, oh, let me catch the McLarens, but then he had the threat from Hamilton, and then Hamilton undercut Max, and so that obviously like instantly Red Bull had to shift their attention to try to cover that off. But at that point, there wasn't really anything they could do. Hamilton kind of already got the undercut from them because then they pit Max. Max ends up behind Hamilton. Obviously Red Bull's thinking is, oh, the tire advantage is going to be crazy, and also just pace
Yeah.
advantage, like they do have a faster car, like he's going to breeze past Hamilton. He did not breeze past Hamilton. Hamilton was
No.
defending literally like Alonso was defending against him. I think it was in 2021 when that happened.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hamilton was just taking a page straight out of Alonso's book, and so that pretty much just ended Max's chances of ever catching the McLarens. Even if he still didn't end up getting past Hamilton, but even if he did, he wasn't gonna catch up to the McLarens anyway. That's also what led into, once Max spits again, he catches back up to Hamilton. He's desperate to get past, does a deep lunge, locks up, hits Hamilton's tire, is like just I mean, even before then, he was already pissed off on the radio. He was like, yo, you guys messed up my strategy. You lost me this race, yada yada yada. And then you could tell that he was just kind of like hot-headed, hot-tempered, and then basically just made a mistake. Hamilton himself like wasn't really upset about the incident. I think also because both of them, and Hamilton specifically, like got away with no damage. So it's like
Yeah.
no harm, no harm, no foul in terms of Hamilton's view of it. At least he himself was just like, oh,
Right.
it's a racing incident, it's whatever. I think a lot more. I think everyone other than Mercedes and Hamilton were being a lot more critical of Max actually about that incident. And
Mhm.
I don't know, my take on it is like obviously it was aggressive, but I also think like it was a mistake. And that's why it's like I'm not necessarily gonna criticize Max too much about it. I'm not gonna call it like necessarily like too aggressive of a move, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's tough to say, right? I think that outcome could have gone, one of three ways, and we're only people who are complaining about it are only complaining about it because of that like outcome at the end. But if he had made that move stick, it would have been a fantastic move, and we wouldn't
One
be,
second, I
being
cannot hear you.
the completely other, spectrum, right? Um, I'd say that overall, I think I understood what Red Bull's strategy was because on that, especially when we get back to like that first to second stint transition
Mm,
where Lewis undercut Max, it made sense because Lewis was going onto hard tires because Lewis was going to do medium hard hard and Max
mm,
was going to do medium medium hard, right? Or
mm.
medium hard medium or something. So
Wait, Max?
with
Yeah,
Lewis,
Max was
that just
doing medium hard, I think. Yeah.
yeah, or something like that. And
Mm,
the point is just that because of the different tire strategy, there was going to be an offset on pit, and Red Bull was arrogant in thinking that yeah, we just breezed by Lewis, and yeah, because it didn't work out. I wouldn't say that Red Bull ruined Max's race. I think that
mm,
strategy was sound. They just didn't account for the greatest of all time,
mm,
and I don't know if you can really blame like them too much for it, thinking
mm.
that it's Max in their car, right?
Well, not
And I
even
think it was
that. I
just not their
think
day.
previous races, like and I'm gonna bring up this point when we get to the McLaren stuff too. But I think going into the race and also by that point in the race, everyone kind of understood that the undercut like was very strong and was very powerful. And
Yes.
definitely previous races,
Yes.
I want to say, I remember I think it was 2020 where the Red Bull and Mercedes were in a similar situation where I'm pretty sure Hamilton was leading. He was going for one stop to like go long on the hards, but Red Bull decided, nah, it's better to pit again, put on fresh tires, and that's exactly what they did. Max caught up, charged up the field, and got past him.
France 2021.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. But there was a Hungary race specifically where this went down.
Really?
Yeah, it might not have been
2019?
between. It might have been 2019 then, because I feel like it was
Well,
definitely
2019, I think
between Hamilton
Hamilton,
and Max.
but Hamilton ended up winning 2019, so maybe it's a different year.
That's
But
why I
anyway,
think it was
besides the point
2021, but
is,
I don't remember who won in 2021. I think it was
oh no,
Max though.
2021 was Ocon, because Max got basically punted by Bottas during the turn one incident. 2021 was a weird Hungary race. That was the one where
You're
Lewis was
right.
alone
Mm.
on the lineup
Yeah, on the pit
because
start.
they all
Yeah.
thought, hmm
Interesting. Okay. All right, my bad. I might be confusing it with another race then. But
it's all good.
regardless, like the undercut is powerful. That's just basically what I was trying to
Yes.
say.
Yeah, clearly the tire wear of to educate our viewers, an undercut typically
Mm,
works if the track has worse tire wear like in the mid part of the stint and the later part. Um, and that means that like if comparatively to the beginning of the tire stint.
mm,
And so Lewis on that beginning part of the tire stint had such a massive advantage on Max, right? That by the time Max was able to get behind Lewis in the second stint, right, they were both in the mid part of their stint,
yeah.
meaning that both of them didn't have that bite anymore. And if neither of them did, then
Yeah.
yeah,
Plus,
then
you're already
Lewis
on
was
a
basically
track
able to stay
that's
ahead.
not the easiest to overtake, and you're trying to overtake Lewis Hamilton. So they were
Exactly.
they were
Yeah.
asking Max to do a lot.
They were asking to do a lot. But I once again I don't necessarily think that it was somehow Red Bull selling. I don't think that at all.
Mm.
It was not a good strategy, not a good call,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's like the worst strategy call of all time. I can see the logic behind it,
No, I
and
fully agree with that. Yeah.
it just set themselves up poorly for the second stop, and that's why
Mm.
yeah, you mentioned like the frustration reached a boiling point for Max because they got undercut again.
Hmm.
But for that, it would have not really made a whole lot of sense for Max to wait go longer before the first stop, just to go shorter on the second stop. That puts you in a position that isn't really ideal, right?
Mm.
Because you've kind of just wasted going further on that first stop, on that first stint. You
Mm.
want to try to extend it so that you have the tires at the end. And once they chose that path, that you can't really, sway from that unless there was a safety car, which is probably what they were gambling on to try to save them.
Mm.
It just wasn't going to work. I think Max's radio messages um, were just uncalled for. He's done this long enough with this team, especially with GP, his race engineer. Dude, sometimes it just doesn't work out. I don't
Mm.
know if that was wholly necessary to just start berating them. And after the race, he mentioned stuff about Red Bull kind of not taking this championship fight seriously, thinking it's in the bag, and
As
I think we realized that that's where it's coming from. It wasn't truly the strategy; it was all of
mm.
that kind of boiling to a point.
Well, also on Red Bull not taking the championship seriously, a lot of the news that's been flowing around now also before that race he was sim racing again.
Yes,
And apparently now Red Bull have talked with him and they said, look, you're not allowed to, sim race really late, like before races anymore.
to
So
2
if
a.m. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So if we're talking about who's taking this championship fight seriously enough,
Hmm.
I would argue Max needs to definitely start to rethink how he's approaching these weekends because this is not 2023
Agree.
where he's just winning every race again. Like I think
Hmm.
2023 when we found out, oh wow, he just like won a sim race and then now he's about to win a Grand Prix. Like it was all fun and games, but it's not fun and games anymore when you
Uh-huh.
when you have a lot more competition against you. So this was
Yeah.
I think it's a good wake up call for Max, and I guess for Red Bull also. If maybe they aren't taking it seriously enough. Kind of like we said, Silverstone was definitely a wake up call for McLaren as well.
Hmm.
This has been a great season. We very much do have a really good championship fight going on right now.
We
It's
got
even
half a
though
season
the
left.
gap between Max
Yeah.
and Lando, yes, is big, but
Yeah.
like
Half a
McLaren,
season left.
Lando can definitely claw this back, and both you and I already agree. Like for sure, McLaren is definitely going to win the constructors.
Crazier gaps have been made up.
Hmm.
And crazier shit has happened in Formula One for sure.
Yeah.
Especially McLaren having the fastest car,
Mm.
and there are more upgrades still to come, but upgrades came this weekend to the Red Bull,
Mm.
despite the result. Right, Red Bull came this weekend supposed to be on putting McLaren on the back foot,
Yeah.
and it was just clear that McLaren has stayed ahead,
Hmm.
despite Red Bull getting upgrades, and their upgrades were potent. Their upgrades basically changed the entire shape of the back of the car to
Yeah.
suit a high downforce setup,
Yeah. And it
something
still
really
wasn't
radical that
enough.
most teams don't do. Yeah, and it still wasn't enough. And so, yeah, I'm sure like the sim racing conversation and everything, like that whole thing, that's great, and that's kind of a wake up call for Max. And yeah, but man, I like
Mm.
it's looking good. It's looking good for not only McLaren, but I would say Mercedes too, if
Mm.
their trajectory of development keeps going.
Mm. No, and to say what obviously I'm not saying it's set in stone that like oh Lando
Mm-hmm.
will beat Max or anything. I think that's still like
Mm-hmm.
open, but at least with McLaren and the constructors, we're just a lot more confident about that, mainly just because of
Yes.
Paris. It's two versus
Yeah.
one, and you have
Yeah.
McLaren with its drivers performing like ridiculously consistency, like top five every time.
Mm-hmm.
Max would pretty much have to win like every single race, I think, to be able to stop McLaren from winning the constructors, but that also doesn't seem like that's likely anymore. So,
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that McLaren should have had a double podium in the past like 5 races, right?
mm.
I guess Spain would be the exception because Piastri actually didn't have like great pace in Spain.
Mm.
But other than that, yeah, I'd say if moving on to these races, we had Spa coming up, which Spa should really suit aspects of the McLaren that Piastri and Lando know well.
Mm.
I and Piastri didn't he get sprint pole last year,
At
2023?
Spa
Yeah, something like
wasn't
that.
no, wasn't it a Qatar?
Um, he got the sprint win at
at
Qatar, but I
Qatar.
thought he got sprint pole
Sprint
at,
pole. I
at,
don't
at
remember
Spa.
honestly.
Point is just
Mm,
they were clearly the second best car and
mm,
actually did put some pressure on Max in
mm,
Spa. And so this year, I can only imagine now, what it's going to be like,
mm.
given the new pace and the improvements that they've made.
Yeah.
Really quick, I want to say that, getting back to qualifying really quick, that Norris's uh, pole time was like 1.3 seconds faster than last year's pole time or something by Lewis, which I want to say is absolutely insane. The
Mm,
development of these cars has gotten ridiculous. And there was,
yeah. And that's not
I
even
just want to
optimal track
quickly,
conditions.
no, it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah. Granted, I think maybe last year's Hungary was really hot in quali and that can hurt.
Mm,
But yeah, it was overtly cold in this one. So
mm,
or yeah, kind of wet, right? But I just wanted to say that, like, I think this ground effect era has actually proven to be pretty damn good. I think there was
mm,
actually some doubt after 2022 about, like, oh, like, this is just going to be another
mm,
dominance thing. But the budget cap combined with allowing these teams to figure it out
mm.
has actually created some great um great racing,
Yeah.
great competition. And I'm actually kind of sad that by next year, that will be the last year we have this generation of car. It's going to get thrown out the window
Mm,
for 2026, and I'm kind of disappointed by that because
yeah.
we'll go back to kind of square one.
Mm. And also just not in terms of the competition also. I remember, 2021 when it got announced, everyone just kept complaining like, "Oh, the cars are going to get slower, the cars are going to get slower." And yes, they were initially slower, but as the development goes on, like the teams figure it
Mhm.
out and the cars get faster and faster. And even eventually we'll definitely do an episode talking about the like properly doing a detailed explanation of the regulations for 2026. But even now, like the simulators and stuff are showing that those cars seem like they're going to be a bit slower also. And I feel like at
Yeah.
least for the first year, like that's fine. Like you got to give the team some time to really like get a grip of the
Mhm.
development, and then eventually, honestly, as fans, like you won't notice too much. Like unless you're being nitty gritty and like always comparing the pole times from every single year, like it's not going to be that deep. As long as
No.
the racing is close and the racing is good, like it's fine at
Yes.
the end of the day.
Right. I agree. That's what 2022 was like. 2022 was slower than
Hmm.
2021, but that was expected. And actually, we saw, especially in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, that we had some great competition
Mm,
between some top teams. So,
yeah.
yeah, hopefully that ends up being the same way. But getting back to the race, let's finally get into
The big
McLaren.
orange papaya orange elephant in the room.
Oh boy. Yeah, you want to start us off with that second stint and what happened with Piastri?
Yes. So you had mentioned Piastri obviously had a great first stint. You get towards the second stint. At this point, Lando, I believe, was like 3 seconds behind Piastri. He was keeping up pace with him. They were both
Something like that.
like chugging along. Neither of them was necessarily like outrightly complaining about their tires or anything or struggling. There
Hmm.
weren't really um at threat from the drivers behind. This was post the Hamilton collision. Hamilton was still like a lot of seconds behind. Hamilton was not a threat. It really was just the two of them at the front of the field. And then what I'm not 100% clear on, but what someone had told me, but I'm not sure. But the way the team approached the strategy call was kind of like Silverstone, where they were kind of consulting the drivers of like, hey, do you want to come in now? What do you think? And so I guess I would hope also that they asked Piastri first since he was leading, but I would assume that they then asked Piastri like, hey, do you want to come in yet? But he's like, no, I still have some life in my tires. But then they go to Lando. They're like, hey, do you want to like stay out or do you want to pit and try to undercut Piastri? And he's like, okay, yeah, pit me now. Pit him now. He undercuts Piastri. Who would have guessed? Crazy undercut. He comes out like 5 seconds ahead or something like that. It's almost like every single person like this race has been undercutting even before the race. Everyone knew that the undercut is powerful, and you knew before you pit him that he was definitely going to come out in front of
Yeah.
Piastri, no matter when you pit Piastri at that point. But Lando undercuts Piastri. He's in front now. He's leading. Um, and then as soon as he came out of the pits, they basically were telling him like, "Hey, you're gonna let Piastri pass." And he didn't really say anything at first. He was just kind of like, "Okay." And then,
He
Piastri is
sat
out
on
the
it.
pits. Piastri is just chilling there waiting, like, for the call, like, hey, is he going to let me pass? And then they really get on the radio. They're like, Lando, you need to do the right thing. Please let him pass. Think about the team, yada, yada, yada.
They
Um,
guilt tripped the man.
no,
They
no,
threw
no. They
everything at him.
were.
Yeah.
I was curious actually what your opinion on that was going to be because I didn't like that. I really didn't like the way they were like, I can't even find the right word to describe it, but yeah, he was like they were like
It was guilt tripping.
they were it was half a command, but also
Mhm.
half like begging, and then like a bit of guilt tripping also. They were like, hey,
Mhm.
like they were desperate for him because they were genuinely they
Mhm.
sounded scared. That's what it was to me. They were really really afraid that like he was not going to listen to them and that he was going to stay in front. And then Lando obviously like tried arguing back. Like one, he literally sped up, increased the gap to like 6 seconds, literally just to prove that he was faster. He was saying like, hey, I'm trying to fight for a world championship here. He kind of was silent for a bit, but then ultimately like he ultimately he let Piastri by. He literally had to massive lift off. I haven't seen a lift off like that. No, like that should have caused a
Yeah.
yellow flag. Him slowing down that much in the middle of the racetrack, that should have been a yellow flag. But he slowed down even though Piastri was like 6 seconds behind him. He let Piastri pass. And you know the rest is history at this point. Piastri first person born after 2000 to win a Grand Prix. His first race win also. First time we've gotten an Australian race winner in a really long time. Um, and yeah, so post and then actually no, we won't talk about post race yet.
Yeah, don't get into it yet.
Yeah.
Uh so I think that McLaren's whole point of view and how they
Mm,
approached it with Lando was completely just like it was ridiculous. I don't like that they kind of treated him like a child. They did not treat him like a championship contender. They treated him like this was a great opportunity for Piastri to get his win.
mm,
Lando shouldn't care about that, and to expect him to is asking too much of these guys. From Lando's perspective, right in that second stint when Piastri screwed up, right.
mm,
Lando caught up by the time that Lando pitted, the gap was about 1.3 seconds or something.
mm,
The gap was starting to approach DRS
mm,
because Piastri had screwed up that second stint.
mm,
You could make the argument that up until that point, it was Piastri's race, totally. But now you got into a scenario where, like, okay, Lando's starting to come into form. Piastri is starting to crack under pressure, right? Maybe this is Lando's race. I don't think it was right for them to make the call forcefully for either driver, and that's what they did. I think what they should have done is, I mean, certainly not pit
mm,
Lando first. I think they were playing it way too safe with that gap with Hamilton.
mm,
Way too safe. I know they were scared about the undercut from Lewis,
mm.
but clearly, like, that was way too much. They should have pit Piastri first, not only right to prevent an undercut from the teammate, but that Piastri was clearly struggling compared to Lando, and that Lando could have actually probably made those 1 or 2 laps further, like, of that stint
Mm.
actually play better than Piastri ended up doing. Right?
Yeah.
There's just every avenue or every clue points to the fact that they should have brought Piastri in first. Even when they brought Lando in first, their first instruction, it shouldn't have been a request. It should have been, hey, you got to let him by because we did this to try to cover Hamilton. We didn't, like, there's stuff that they didn't anticipate about Lewis and Max, so
Mm,
they could tell Lando, hey, you got to do it now. Once you do it, you're free to fight. I have heard people talk about how that should have been their approach, and
mm.
I agree. That should have been the approach.
Yeah.
The approach
No,
should
because
have
I
been
I
may the
definitely
best man win.
questioned also why they waited until after the pit stop to say, "Hey, let him by." Like, because it didn't seem like because like you just said, it's different if this was they had talked about it way before that this was going to be the situation versus they pit him and then they realized oh wait oh shit he's going to be in front of Piastri wait let Piastri by and yeah it's everything that you just said it's just it's like what I think we said in Silverstone where one it's kind of something that McLaren needs to work on getting more experience, like being in race winning situations like that. But then also in terms of the team has a certain responsibility in those situations to be the ones to like be making the proper strategy calls. Like it shouldn't be kind of waiting to see like what your driver's necessarily going to tell you. You should have already had the plan of you guys are going to pit like during this time because it was the same thing in Silverstone where why are you giving Lando the chance to try to pick which tires he's going to go to. Like he's not, in the middle of driving a race car right now. Like you
Yeah,
should be the ones to have the judgment to say, hey, you have fresh medium tires. We're putting these on you, like regardless of what you
yeah.
say. Is that same type of thing. And that's where also I was talking to like one of my friends about this, and he was trying to say that um basically like none of the like the fault is only like on the team, and then that's why like the mistake of pitting Lando first is on the team, and so that's why like them making him give the position back should be fine because that's them just trying to like make up their mistake for Piastri. But I think it's more, I think their responsibility should have been making, like, having to apologize for a mistake to Piastri instead of Lando like they did. I think it should have been at the end of the race, you go apologize to Piastri saying, hey, we made a mistake. We didn't give you the better strategy. We're sorry about that. Rather than not even making a mistake, but literally just commanding Lando to just outright give up a win. I think those are two very, very different things. And I think they should have gone with the former.
I agree. I agree with that. I think they were so desperate on getting this opportunity to see their young driver get his first win
Mm,
that they forgot that yeah, like Lando is part of their team too, and
mm,
it's really tough to say. It's really tough, but Lando should be their priority. Piastri is only in his second year. He has so much time to develop and to get better and better. And
mm,
you could make the argument that his ceiling is potentially higher than Lando's, right? And it could
mm,
come next year. He could already be better than Lando. Is he better than him now in this current championship fight? No,
mm,
no, he's not. Lando's the one that's going to lead you to the promised land of a constructors championship, not Piastri. If you have the mentality that no, 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 but it's
mm.
we're all in this together.
And we're back. Keep going.
Yeah, I was going to say that if McLaren's whole perspective was, we need to be a team here, right, and give our driver the win. Like I think that's the wrong mentality,
Hmm.
and that from a team perspective, right, in terms of leadership and in terms of like a blah, 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 a philosophical sense, right, you could say that no, 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 they made the right choice and and
Mm.
and lifting all boats, right,
Yeah.
but I that goes against the philosophy of racing, and it goes against the philosophy that Lando and Oscar should have.
Mm,
In reality, I think it's Oscar. I'm not blaming him for this, but
mm,
if Oscar was just an absolute legend, he would have been like, "No, I don't want to win my first win like this. You're not going to hand it to me on a silver platter. You guys put us in this situation. Just if I want to beat him, I'll beat him on track, right? I think
I feel like most people wouldn't do that though necessarily
no,
because it's like
no,
because at
they
the end of the
wouldn't.
day
They wouldn't. That's what I mean.
you're
I'm
about to
not
get an F1 win. But I get what you're saying.
I'm not
I
expecting
absolutely
that
get what
from
you're
him.
saying. Yeah.
But I'm trying to give a sense of this is my perspective on it.
Mm,
I don't think Lando was in the wrong making a big deal about guys. What are we doing here?
mm,
I don't want to do that. And for people to say that he was being a dick, he was being a jerk, he wasn't being a team player
mm,
by giving up the position, you do not understand what it's like to be an F1 racer. An F1 racer who just got their first win, not like 6 races ago or something,
mm,
right? He knows better than anyone what it's like to have to wait. In Monza 2021, you could make the argument, right, that Lando deserved that win just like Ricardo did. And yet he didn't fight. There was even one point where he asked, like, hey, like, I still got some pace here. Can
mm,
Ricardo, should we switch, right, for the
mm,
best solution? And McLaren told him to stay, and Lando didn't complain after that,
mm,
right? Um, so many races you could point to that Lando should have had the win this
mm,
season in 2021, and something beyond his control was screwed up,
mm.
or something within his control, but something that didn't have anything to do with like being a driver, right?
Yeah.
So I cannot stand the lack of sympathy from people who look at Lando and they call him a dick instead of trying to see it from his perspective, which
Yeah.
is he has an opportunity now to fight Max Verstappen for the championship. He has an opportunity to fight Max Verstappen for the championship. And people who can't hear that, people who
Hmm.
can't understand that for Lando,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Mm.
You don't watch F1.
No. I mostly agree with you, except for when you're necessarily saying that they should prioritize Norse. And mainly that's because, and I think you had mentioned it before, and I'm sure you want like talk about it now and you'll agree with me. Part of the issue is that it doesn't seem like it's as clear who the number one driver is. Even though like yes, Lando like is the number one driver. It's like you kind of know, but it's not as like out like written out in print as we've seen in other teams, like it is in Red Bull now, or like it was with Mercedes with Hamilton and Valtteri. It's not as clear cut. That's also partially just because of like how close, in pace and performance Norris and Piastri are. But at the same time, Norris is still like always ahead. They're close, but Norris is always ahead. Like this season alone, he is just ridiculously outqualified Piastri, and he's finished him like in front of him in the race most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, like, based off that, that's why I don't think it's necessarily as clear cut to say, hey, McLaren should prioritize Norris. I do agree with you though, and I think you'll agree with me and say that they should probably have clear guidelines of who the number one driver is, and obviously that should be Norris, but that's just not necessarily the case right now. And then also, at least my personal view on it, I always in these types of situations always lean more towards just let them race. And that's also why I don't think it should necessarily be like, oh, let Lando keep the position specifically because of he has a chance of finding the championship. I think from the team, you shouldn't necessarily say, oh well, he has more points in the championship, let's like prioritize him. I think it should still just be like, hey, let's just let them race. Lando got the better strategy, he's kind of faster, like, okay, yeah, this is his race. And I say that to say just because, at least from what I've seen in the past, if you're in a situation like that where one, it's not going to hurt the team regardless of what order they finish in, and you're not really, you don't really have that much of a threat from behind, like you just said, like Hamilton, like really was not a threat.
Yeah.
That's why I think like it should always just ultimately be let them race. And I know I've brought this up before, but I always think back to, I'm sure it was Russia 2018 when it was a similar situation with Valtteri and Hamilton.
Lewis.
Like Valtteri
Mm-hmm.
dominated that entire weekend, and just because of Lewis's title fight, and yet like Vettel
With
was in
Vettel.
third, and he
Mm-hmm.
was like kind of catching up. But I would still always argue that they could have let Valtteri still win that race, and Hamilton would have gotten second, and like that's still good for the team. If Hamilton cares so much about his world championship, then he should have caught up and like passed Valtteri on track, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. And I just say that to say that that's how I typically view these things. So from the team perspective, I don't think it should necessarily be prioritized one or the other. But for Lando, because of everything that you just said, of you need to think about the situation you're in, like you actually have a very, very like reasonable chance at putting a fight to Max in this world championship, potentially winning this thing at the end of the day. I think it's a situation where he kind of needed to put his foot down and be a little bit selfish. And also, if we're talking, if McLaren is like out here kind of being like scared and like not wanting to be like, not wanting to prioritize one another, then you need to show them like, look, I have been with you guys like this entire time. I have been the best,
Exactly.
except for like that one season with Sainz. I have been the best driver you have had. You have had my back. I've had your back. I could have left during the times when you didn't have a good car. I've still stayed. I'm at the point right now where we can get race wins. I'm trying to win. I'm trying to get you a drivers world championship. Like you gave me the better strategy also. Like
Mm-hmm.
this was also your doing. You gave me the better strategy. Why am I just going to give up a win? Yes, I think in the moment, obviously Piastri would have been upset, and I think the team would have been upset, but I think, and maybe he's thinking also, I don't want to hurt the relationship with my teammate and with the team, but I feel like even this situation still hurt those relationships. And from Lando's perspective, I think it's just you kind of needed to be cutthroat and just prioritize you and prioritize the win in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I'll rephrase a little bit of what I said before, that I'm not saying they should have like a 1-1-2
Mm,
structure in terms of drivers. I'm not necessarily saying that. I was trying to make the point that any lack of sympathy towards Norris is a bit ridiculous. From
mm,
his perspective, I can totally see it being the case. I think from Norris, right? Yeah, he's given, way more years, right? He was in 2019, right? And he spent the first 2 years, right, learning from science, right, and learning with the
mm,
team before he became the lead driver, right? And you can make the argument now. I think there's a good argument to make that Lando is better than science now, right? Lando has been 2019, 2020, 2021, right, 2022, and then last season was with Piastri 1-2. In my view, right, 6 years with the team should trump 2 years or
yeah.
in your second season with the team.
Mm,
And I think in terms of getting not necessarily preferential treatment, but basically not doing what they did, which was force Lando to give it up.
mm.
That's a bit much. what McLaren should have done is taken responsibility for the mistake that they made. They shouldn't
Yeah,
have burdened it on their drivers. They
absolutely.
should have just said, Piastri, Oscar, really sorry, man. Today, we basically gave your teammate the undercut. You
Hmm.
drove a great race and you deserved the win. But unfortunately we screwed it up for you.
Yeah,
And we'll just have to search for that other win next time.
absolutely.
Why is that a bad answer? And that's also actually it's not even a question of good or bad. That's the right thing to do because that doesn't shoulder it on Lando.
Yeah.
Instead, they almost made a mockery of him on live television in front of millions of people. So what is Lando going to think now? Lando's going to go into these next races thinking like, am I supposed to be selfish? Right? Am I supposed to think for myself in terms of the championship? Right? Or if push comes to shove again, am I going to have to sacrifice my personal performance, right, so that the team can feel whole and compassionate?
Yeah.
I
My
I just yeah.
Yeah. My hope for him is that he does come to the realization of, oh, I have, because what I'm really scared for him is if they get to the point where we get to Abu Dhabi and it's like 7 points from this championship and he's going to look back
Yes.
at this race. And I think
Fuck. Mm-hmm.
it's so much worse to feel regret about this decision than if he had been selfish and kind of made the team upset. Like that's like, you can apologize, you can move on. But like regretting like making a choice like that, that's gonna sit with you for a very, very long time. And that's not gonna feel good. And you could
Yeah.
and that's my frustration with him also. I'm not necessarily trying to like I don't have well, it's not necessarily like a criticism. Like, yeah, I just said, I wish he had done that differently. But one of the things I was just a little upset to see is that, obviously initially like post race on the radio and stuff, he was still very calm. He was like, oh, Lando deserved the win. I was prioritizing the team. But then by the time honestly, before you even get to the podium celebration, you saw in the cool down room, he was already
Yeah.
very clearly regretting the decision that he just made. He was very, very
Yeah.
upset. Lewis Hamilton was catching strays.
Yeah. Lewis was just trying to make banter. He was just trying to make small talk. He was
Yeah,
like, hey,
Lewis
you
was
guys are
happy
fast
for
today.
you, bro. Yeah, he's like, yo,
Yeah.
good for you, front row lockout. Like,
Oh.
good for McLaren. That used
Lando's
to be
like,
my whole team. Like, he's
you had a
like,
fast car
yeah,
7 years ago. Lewis like, all right,
I,
cool,
I
man.
think I don't know if I saw it in the actual but in the actual video, but I feel like someone said he even like threw his hat down, and then that was
He
giving
did.
Hamilton flashbacks
Yep.
of Rosberg. I was
Hmm.
like, yeah,
Probably.
um,
No, I'm sure Lewis shut up after that because he realized, crap. Yeah,
yeah, no,
this is not
he's
great.
not in a good
Hmm.
mood. And then people keep showing that in the podium celebration, like he wasn't even really celebrating with Oscar and stuff also. And it's like one, I fully agree with you where people should not criticize Lando so much like for behaving like that. I think maybe he seems like he's been like a bit of a sore loser, but I don't think it's been that bad. Like you got to remember,
No,
bro has the chance to win F1 races and he's not winning F1
I
races. You
I
would be
wouldn't
pretty
call
upset too.
him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him a sore loser. He
I
was
think after
that
this
win
race, I'd
was
say
was
it a little
taken
bit.
from him.
Mm.
I yeah. I think in
Okay,
this. I,
no,
just, I,
you're right.
want
You're
to make
right.
this 100
Sore
percent
loser might
clear.
not be the right
I want to make this
word.
100% clear.
Mm.
Do I think he did the right thing? I think he did in terms of putting the team first. I think that means a lot. I think with how much loyalty he has for the team, right?
Hmm.
And I think we might come back in Abu Dhabi and he's going to regret it, right? And maybe as a driver, it's not being cut through and everything. The
Hmm.
points I was making before was simply to say that we need to have some sympathy for this guy,
Hmm.
that why the decision was so difficult,
Yeah.
and that ultimately the real responsibility is on McLaren.
Mm.
That it's their fault. This whole
Yeah.
situation happened,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
it's gonna be their fault if we get to Abu Dhabi and he's gonna lose the driver championship by 6 points,
Mm.
because that the 7 points he could have earned today could have won him.
Yeah.
And for people who are like, that's impossible, like it's not gonna happen. Come
It's
on,
not
it's Red Bull, blah
impossible.
blah. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Come on, man. Like that way of thinking, right?
Mm.
It's why they're there and you're here, kind of thing. I just
Yeah.
you can't think like that.
Mm.
You got to think like a winner.
Yeah, it is really just a tough situation though. The most difficult thing, and I was literally like actually teaching one of my friends about F1 like last week because he was starting to get into it, and I realized because obviously most people are used to team sports, and then I had to explain to him.
Mhm.
So it's like, hey, so you have the team, and there's a team constructors championship, and the drivers are employed by the teams, but the drivers are also kind of driving from themselves because they're drivers championship,
Yes.
and that honestly is like a very, very like difficult balance. Um, And I don't know, that's why I said like I get like, why the team obviously was trying to do what they do, but I guess I care a bit more about the drivers, and I'm prioritizing the drivers to where I say like I think the better thing to have like happened in that situation is Lando being selfish.
Yeah, yeah, I see that point too. Yeah, that's basically all of my chest, man. As a McLaren fan, it was both a good weekend
Mm,
because the car is clearly like, man, this car is a rocket ship. It's
mm,
great. It looks balanced. It looks stable. It looks like both of their drivers have no problem extracting all the pace they want from it in both quality and the race. What more could you ask for a car,
mm,
right? In this really competitive era, right?
mm.
And on the other hand, everything that was within their control, they basically screwed up.
Yeah.
And it's just another. It was just another chapter in that. This is
Mm,
just another race where they screwed up. Where I'm telling you, man, if they lose the championship, it's going to be because of this stuff.
yeah.
And
No, I agree.
I just, I'm as a fan, it's getting hard to root. It's getting
Mm,
hard to root for them because I'm just tired of this, and I'm really tired. One last time to reinstate this, I'm really tired and um, frustrated that they put all of it on the guy that had put the team on his back for the past
mm,
few years, man.
yeah.
That's just it. It's just gross. I really think Lando deserved better.
No, I 100% agree. And I think even as much as we're criticizing McLaren too, like we said, I think McLaren is obviously like the greater McLaren isn't new to this. McLaren is, a legendary team in F1, but this
Right,
specific
right.
McLaren team that's been building, since kind of that time when they had Lando and Sainz, basically since Zach Brown was CEO, and they've kind of like trying to build up, and now they've gotten to this point. I do have like a little bit of sympathy for them, to where like, look, it's gonna take some time before they really get as like refined as some of the top teams like Mercedes or Red Bull. But at the same time, like, this is multiple races now where this is happening, and it's just there. It gets to a point where if you haven't learned from, like, if they haven't started like learning from their mistakes, then it's only just going to continue to get worse and not continue to get better,
Yeah.
and that could end up just ruining their chances, not just this season but like next season as well too, because I'm really hoping we end up with a situation like we have now next season, where we have like Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren fighting
That's
together.
the hope.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, um, that's basically all I have about the race, man. It was a great race. I think it was boring at times. I think the drama and everything made up for some of the slower bits.
Mm,
And I think it's just another building block race where we're looking forward. And if you had asked us last year, right, if there would be this like good of a turnaround in terms of the competitiveness,
yeah.
there would be some doubt.
Hmm.
And I think we're both so happy that
Yeah.
like it ended up working in the fans' favor that it's
Hmm.
now competitive
Also,
again.
honestly, in terms of competitiveness, also, I don't know if I mentioned it last episode, but seeing Max, like, obviously, okay, I've said this before. I've never been like a Max hater. I fucking love Max.
Right.
Um, but
But
seeing
seeing him
him
struggle.
having, yeah, see, no, not necessarily. I don't want to say seeing him struggle, because that sounds like I'm preying on his downfall.
Oh,
Just seeing him,
I didn't mean it like that.
there, just seeing him like fight a lot more after, the season
Mhm.
that he had is just has just been really entertaining. Maybe not this race because he was very upset, but I remember Silverstone. He didn't even win Silverstone, but he was just really happy. Like, even with P2 at Silverstone, he was like, "Oh, we kind of thought we were going to be on the back foot." He ended up driving a great race, still ended up on the
Mhm.
podium, still extended his championship lead. And I feel like he seemed happier that Silverstone race than in some of the races that he won in 2023, and I thought that was just great to
I
see.
agree.
And then
100% agree.
obviously, my favorite driver Hamilton is also having a pretty good time this season. So it's overall just been great so far.
Lewis is having a Cinderella send off in terms
Mm,
of like the big moments.
mm,
But on the other hand, Russell is also having a great season, becoming the true lead of the team. So I think it's honestly the best of both worlds.
mm,
I think in the end, it's Lewis is going to leave with a smile on his face, and Russell's going to watch him leave with a smile on his face.
yeah,
And yeah, I think for Mercedes, they're having a great year.
absolutely. All right, we'll be back soon. Give you guys probably a spa breakdown, or spa race breakdown, and maybe some news.
A
There's been
lot of
some news.
news.
There's been some news going on. We'll definitely have a news episode. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. Peace out.